Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Being Untamed and Unafraid. I want to share with you something personal. I'm sharing with you today 8 lessons that I learned from traveling the world. I left the US about 9 years ago, and the first country that my family and I moved to was China. We moved to Macau, China, and it was the first time I'd ever really left the country. Mexico doesn't count, okay? Because when you're from the U.S., going to Mexico, it's like going to Florida. It's a hop, skip, and a jump. It's not that far away from home, but moving like thousands and thousands of miles away, where it takes you a day and a half to get to your end destination, is a big step. There's a lot of things I learned. I learned a lot of things, but today I'm going to share with you some of the ones that made it to my top 8 list. Okay. If you've ever traveled, you know that travel can be awe-inspiring, right? I haven't met many people who've lived overseas for a long time who look forward to going back home. What I have noticed is that the expats that usually are craving to go back home are the expats who really haven't acclimated to other cultures and who really are stuck in their ways with their own cultures. Also, a lot of those people who get homesick, who are not good at making new friends, who don't like to be alone, those are the ones that have trouble really settling in to a new country and a new environment. And so I did go through that in the beginning. I did miss some of the comforts of home, but overall I really did enjoy and still continue to enjoy learning new cultures, learning new things about myself, about humanity, about the world around me. And definitely moving overseas and living overseas for as long as I have has helped shift my perspective in things that are really important to things that are not important, and also has helped me focus on what the things that I want to change about myself and the things that I don't like about myself, and also values that I look for in the connections that I make with other people. So number 1 is actually changing your perspective in materialism. So one of the positives of being an expat and having moved around a bit is that you really do prioritize the things that you do have, your material possessions, and the things that you don't need, you don't want to spend your money on, because what's the point of carrying it around if you're going to move in a few months? But because of that, because you just don't hoard items, you tend to appreciate things that you see. And so I can walk into a store and fall in love with something, and if I'm not staying in that country for a really long time, or if I'm in the middle of moving and I don't want to ship a lot of things, then I will appreciate that item far more than I would when I would bring it home. For example, right now I'm living in Spain and I've been here about 5 months. I don't drive, and I do miss driving. I do miss being able to get in my car, and going places and discovering nooks and crannies, especially in a new country. Spain is an easy country to drive in. They do drive on the same side as the US, so it's not something that you have to get used to it. You can actually just get up and go and drive, as long as you have the license to drive in Spain. And often I visualize myself in a convertible, driving around with my daughter with the top down. But realistically, I really wouldn't be using the car as often as I tell myself that I'm going to use it. So it's far easier and quicker for me to hop on the tram or get in a taxi if I'm not going anywhere than more than 20 minutes away from where I live. And ironically, the culture here, even though they do have a lot of cars and people drive, for the majority of the locals, they do walk a lot or they take public transportation. So definitely materialism is one of the lessons that I learned. And I tried to keep my suitcases less than 5 total between my daughter and I, if and when we have to move countries. Number two has been the different cultures have different priorities. So society values fame, right? I know in the US, fame is like number one. How famous are you? How many followers you have? Your fortune, your possessions. And it falls along the line of materialism, but they consider materialism success. So it's a little different than just having items in the sense of materialisms that showcase how much fame you have, how successful you are. And the interesting thing is that while like TikTok and Instagram is still popular in Spain, it's not something that the culture itself, the locals here, value. In Spain, they value family time, and they still practice something called siesta. So in the afternoon between the hours of 2 and 5, most businesses close and people go back home to spend time with their family. They eat a late lunch, and then they do take a nap. The nap is called siesta. And then around 5:30, they head back to work. And it's a long day, but it's a day spent around family. And so their priorities here in Spain revolve around family time and being around those you care about and those you love, as opposed to working till your fingers fall off like they do in the US, right? So it's not like that here. So number three is that I noticed a lot of people around the world don't have a lot of like basic items. When I lived in Asia, I noticed at the 7-Elevens and other stores, the local people would buy items for the day or for the next day. So it's really strange because I would walk into 7-Eleven and on the shelves there would be like a lot of single-use items, but you could still get like 2 or 3 uses out of it. So for example, lipstick would come in this little pouch and you would twist the pouch and it would be in a little stick, like a Q-tip stick. And it would give you maybe 2 or 3 uses, and that was it, as opposed to spending $2 or $3 on a lipstick that would last you forever. They would spend maybe $1 or less than that on this item. And they do that with a lot of other basic stuff like sugar and salt, very small packaging, as opposed to the US where we buy things in bulk because we don't want to continue to go back to the store, right? That's our rationale. We rationalize in the US with buying a lot of bulk items with we don't want to travel back to the store, less shopping for us. And also, if it's an item that you will continue to buy a lot of, like sugar, salt, toilet paper, then you know you will eventually use it, so you don't have to continue to buy it every week or every month. But I did notice that in Asia, a lot of the locals just don't carry a lot of the basic items in bulk. Everything is small quantities. So that was a big difference. Number 4 is making friends. So in Asia, the expat community was a lot bigger and it was easier for me to make friends there. In Spain, I've lived here in Spain now 5 months, and the expat community, I don't really consider expats because they're mostly British. So it's like, it's a hop, skip, and a jump for them. While in Asia, when I lived in both Macau and Bangkok, because I lived in both Asian countries, it was easier for me to find more American expats than it is here. But, side note, I am making a conscious decision. So this was conscious, okay, that I wanted to branch out and make friends that were not American because I didn't see the point in continuing to make just friends that are American in a foreign country. So I want to make local friends and I want to make friends from other countries as well, not just American friends, because to me that just defeats the purpose of living in a foreign country. So that's a big difference between Spain and Asia. The Spaniards they're nice. While they're friendly and they're kind, they find it strange when someone comes off too friendly and they don't know you. So it's easier for you to make friends if you're introduced to them by someone else, as opposed to me. Like, I'm a very friendly person and I can walk into anywhere and smile and make friends and, invite people for drinks or dinner, lunch, especially if we're already out, if my friends and I are already out and I see people by themselves. I've always been that type of person where I would invite somebody over, like, hey, are you sitting by yourself? Come join us and sit by yourself. And I still do that here, but to them, it's not something that happens very often. So they're taken aback by that, as opposed to in Asia, when I did that, mostly in Bangkok, because I lived in Bangkok the longest as an expat. It was easier for me to do that and people didn't find it strange. So that's something that's very different. Okay. Number 5 is that you learn to be flexible. So there are things that are less reliable in other countries as opposed to the Western world. From bus schedules to electricity, it's not uncommon to have your plans disrupted on a daily basis. I remember that when I lived in Bangkok, every time it would rain, you just knew your electricity would go out, but number 1, your internet would go out. And so you have to have reliable hotspot on your phone so that if you're working from home or there was an emergency, that you had a way to connect to the outside world, right? You don't have that problem in the US. In the US, the electricity doesn't get cut off just because it's raining outside, right? So that's something that's very interesting. In Spain, the only thing thus far that I've experienced is that the buses do get overcrowded. I live about a 25-minute walk from the city center, which is not a long walk at all. I actually really enjoy it when it's not too hot out. But when I don't want to walk into town and I have to take the bus in, I've noticed that lately, so it's seasonal. Right now, I would think that the buses wouldn't be so crowded because it's low season. But I remember waiting a few days ago, 3 buses passed and they were full. And so the buses would come every 15, 20 minutes. So I was waiting roughly almost an hour for one bus where I could have just walked and got to the city center quicker. But I was enjoying the day. It was a cool day out. So I just enjoyed standing there and scrolling on Facebook while I waited for the bus. I've never had that happen to me in New York. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I took public transportation everywhere. There's no reason to have a car in New York unless you live outside of one of the 5 boroughs. You can get by on public transportation, and they were on time. So I've never had that problem prior to living outside of the US. So that's something to consider, that you have to learn to be flexible. Number 6 is that you do waste a lot of time, like I just said. Everything is really slow paced outside of the US. And I did notice that compared to China, compared to Bangkok, compared to Spain, everything is slower here. I really don't see a lot of people wasting time on their phones. The younger generation does that, but for the most part, everyone just is slow and they're out enjoying meals. And it's really interesting because in the morning when I take my kid to school, the shops here, like the coffee shops and the cafes, they'll be open and there'll be tons of people just sitting there having their first cup of coffee, which I'm assuming is a cup of coffee if it's 7 o'clock in the morning. You never know. Maybe people get up earlier. But I'm walking to the bus stop to take my kid to school, and there are people sitting down, enjoying their cup of coffee with their toast. And they do toast and tomato here. And all the shops are full like that in the morning. They like to go out and they like to take their time and they're not rushed. Gosh, I remember back in New York when I used to have to work in the city, traveling from Coney Island into Manhattan, everyone was just rushing everywhere. And you drank your coffee in a rush. And even your lunchtime, you spent it in a rush. And you never really sat down and enjoyed anything. That was actually one of the reasons why I left New York when I was 29 and moved to Florida. because of the anxiety of everything being rushed. And almost 30 years living in New York, it gets a little stressful if you're constantly on the go, go, go. So even though we are wasting a lot of time, and that's how we would say it in New York, is that we're wasting time because you should be doing something. It's actually been something to get used to. It's something to get used to, guys, okay? So it's definitely foreign to me, having a lot of free time, and I am enjoying it, and I'm learning how to manage my time better because of this, so I'm not rushed. So it's amazing. I do like it. The good thing is that you do end up figuring out what you value with your time and how much actual time you waste doing nothing as opposed to rushing everywhere. So it's really cool. Number 7 is being able to travel. It's a privilege, you guys, okay, especially with what's going on right now in the world. And a lot of people not being able to travel to see their family or just travel for fun. I am definitely not taking my travel privileges for granted, and I'm enjoying every minute of it. And I do take precaution when I travel. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I suggest to all my friends back home that whenever possible that they do take the opportunity to travel as much as they can, because you make a lot of friends, your perspectives shift, and there actually is a lot of things that you can do when you travel. There's so much experiences that you can have that you wouldn't have if you stayed back home and didn't take the opportunity to learn new cultures and make new friends everywhere you go. So that is number 7. Number 8 is that people really are the same. We all want the same things. Like, even though cultures are different everywhere you go, and it could be minor differences, it doesn't have to be major differences. At the end of the day, parents love their children, and people go to work, and everyone has bills to pay, and everyone just wants to be happy and not stressed out and be safe and be healthy. And so if you can look past some of those differences that might be foreign to you, that might be uncomfortable for you in the beginning stages of your travel, you really will open up yourself to really realizing that we are deep down looking for the same things, and we do value at the core the same things. And so your perspective of the world will change if you get out of your home country and visit someplace new. Different people and societies will and can teach you a lot about the world and a lot about yourself. And yeah, it can be expensive to travel internationally. Make sure that you sign up for all those travel notices and discount websites, because it is really worth the expense. The experiences, there's no value that you can put on your experiences when it comes to traveling and opening up your mindset and your perspective and creating new amazing relationships everywhere you go. So these are my tips, and I hope that you found them useful, and I will see you in the next video.